I bring you greetings from the New York Philharmonic. I'm so glad to be here with you. I am first of all a musician, and I'd like you to allow me to begin with music. We're about to hear a little clip of music performed by the New York Philharmonic, and while you listen, I'd like you to think of 3 words that describe that piece to you. So what does that music say to you? What does it sound like to you? Cartoons? Others? I'm sorry? Yes, thank you. And joyful.
Cross-cultural.
Cross-cultural. I wonder what accents you hear in it. You know what I mean by accents? As though we're spoken language. African. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Who do you think might have composed such a piece of music? Prokofiev. I'll introduce you to the composer, who is named Hawa Sacco. She was 13 years old when she composed this for the New York Philharmonic last year. She came to us through PS 59 in Manhattan and as a participant in our Very Young Composers program. The performance that you just heard was by the New York Philharmonic, led by Associate Conductor Case Scaglione. Now, Hawa Sacco is not a prodigy, and that's exactly the point. Over 100 students every year, ages 9 to 13, compose music for the musicians of the New York Philharmonic through our Very Young Composers program. Now, Hawa's ability and voice do stand out, so she's gotten some special opportunities through that. But all the children we work with do create real works of art, whatever their musical background, some coming in with no musical background at all. Very Young Composers is actually an ongoing experiment, now 20 years in. The question is, do all children have a creative spark in music? Well, of course, we're not working with every child in the world, but it's true that we have not yet found one child without a distinctive, unique, creative musical voice. What happens when we put creativity ahead of technical learning? When we turn the traditional model on its head? You know, growing up as a composer, trained as a composer, the traditional model is you have to learn every level of technique and understand music history before you begin to presume to make your own statement in this august art form. What happens if you have permission to create before you have to learn notation, which is something after 40 years I'm still learning? Well, in the short term, what happens is what you just heard. Okay, this is a young woman who didn't know how to notate music when she started creating music through our program. In the long term, what happens? Well, since our first students are just now coming of age, we're only beginning to find out, and it's a very interesting story that we'll continue to follow, but I don't have any definitive answers for you yet about how we're transforming American culture. I had another shot here. Here's some more Very Young Composer students. And more, this is a performance at the first NY Phil Biennial 2 years ago of music by very young composers. This is just one example of the first big idea I want to share with you today, that cultural organizations like the New York Philharmonic, but also like hundreds of others in New York City and many thousands across the United States, offer really extraordinary learning opportunities in music and all the arts. There's no question of the importance and unique value of full-time certified music and arts teachers in public schools. Full-time staff members, of course, can make the arts integral to every child's education in ways that no outside agency can. At the same time, in my own field of music, and specifically orchestra music, there's no question that a lot of instruction goes on outside of school time. In fact, most of the professionally oriented training does. Playing in a good youth orchestra, for instance, is a sine qua non of aspiring to working in the orchestra world. Summer music camp has a unique ability to deepen a child's interest and commitment, and of course, private lessons are essential, and attending professional concerts, and seeing performances and master classes on YouTube. So there's a whole host of cultural and educational and even commercial enterprises that contribute to music education. This doesn't devalue music education provided in schools, which is, of course, grounded in solid pedagogy and developmental theory. But to say that there's a big world of arts experience and opportunity out there beyond the schools would be a grave understatement. Many cultural organizations have a long history and deep commitment and highly evolved philosophies on education. Literally hundreds of these organizations in New York are members of the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable, which I am honored to co-chair. In fact, our major annual conference is coming up, April 27th and 28th, and I would be remiss not to give it a little plug right here. Face to Face is the largest arts education conference in the region. 2 days, 500 plus arts educators, top-notch keynote addresses, dozens of workshops for every need and interest, right a few blocks away over here at City College. You can check it out at www.nycaieroundtable.org. Now, to get a little bit more specific about the New York Philharmonic, we are both inspired and chastened by the legacy of perhaps the most famous music educator of all time. Leonard Bernstein taught us many things in his historic young people's concerts at the Philharmonic. They are now almost all of them available on DVD, and I recommend studying them. Above all, for me, Bernstein showed a faith that understanding how to hear masterworks of music could change people's lives. The urgency of his teaching, his ability to connect with what people know and what matters to people who are listening, his agile use of oral examples in the orchestra, all these contributed to a huge impact on a whole generation of listeners. Not a few members of today's New York Philharmonic included. Almost all of them talk about the impact that those concerts had on them. So it is now my awe-inspiring responsibility to create and host those concerts in a multimedia age. They have evolved as our audiences and our resources have evolved into something much more interactive and participatory, still focused on great music of the repertoire, including, of course, music composed today. For instance, by some of our very young composers. What you see here, the honoring of Nina Mosky at 12 years old and the piece that the orchestra has just played, is something that's experienced by 12 to 15,000 other school children attending these concerts, who go away understanding that the orchestra is really open to them and their ideas. We're now in beta with a new online learning platform as well, which builds classroom lessons around our latest and most successful young people's concerts. And with help, as you've heard from Teachers College's Professor Lori Custodero, we have developed a very popular series of very young people's concerts for 3 to 6 year olds. Same values, but somewhat different feel. Pretty clearly, all these manifestations of the legacy of young people's concerts constitute something unique to a major orchestra like the New York Philharmonic. Who else could provide such experiences? We devote major resources. It's core to our mission, the mission to bring great performances to all kinds of people in ways that matter, in ways that really connect. Then too, we have invested heavily in developing a faculty of teaching artists. Outstanding musicians with that special something for bringing music alive in classrooms and community settings. Their training and their work is rooted in Bernstein's legacy, but also in Maxine Green's philosophy and ultimately in John Dewey. They work currently with over 5,000 students in committed partner elementary schools in all 5 boroughs, co-teaching with classroom teachers and music specialists through a sequential 3-year curriculum in listening, performing, and composing. These Philharmonic schools are also core to our mission as an orchestra. The program is a permanent commitment. It has its own endowment. It's a commitment to New York. It's a critical way for a major institution to put down roots in far-flung communities. And it's a resource to orchestras all over the world who are developing work that emulates ours. There are whole other areas of educational commitment at the Philharmonic, but I think you're getting the point. We in New York's cultural organizations are always in research and development on how to connect in the classroom, on stage, and on the internet. We're your allies as educators. So I urge you who are not in cultural organizations to reach out to us, see our work, invite us in to understand your work better. Let's find ways to learn from each other, and let's partner to continue evolving the cutting edge of arts education. For my second point, I want to return to the very young composers and ask what they teach us. Those creative young minds are teaching us about music, as teaching us musicians about music and about music's future, but I think they have more to teach us beyond that. When John Deek founded Very Young Composers, here he is back about the year 2000, and here he is more recently, still at it. He was associate principal bass of the New York Philharmonic when he started the program, and is probably the only person who's retired from a major orchestra in order to join the staff. John took our learner-centric model to its utmost expression. In a child's first year in the program, about age of 10, we don't so much teach them to compose as they teach us to realize faithfully what's in their imaginations, which often is rooted, of course, in cultures other than the Philharmonics, and that's the point. We want to bring other cultures into the world of symphonic music. Teaching artists in Very Young Composers work purely as scribes, okay? Preparing performance materials for the musicians of the Philharmonic and postponing the need to learn music notation. But those students who are most inspired by the experience of having their ideas brought to life can continue in the Composer's Bridge program, which we designed to prepare students for any of the advanced opportunities for composers that exist in New York City. In the Bridge, they must learn to notate their own music, they must learn the specifications of all the instruments, they have to learn to run their own rehearsals. We work hard to build all these skills without crushing that creative spark that they experience in their first year in the program. That's the biggest challenge, right? To build skills without losing creativity. The idea of Very Young Composers has really caught the attention of organizations across the United States and abroad. The Philharmonic is, of course, a global institution. We tour internationally several times a year. The uptake in other cultures, some of them educationally very different from the United States, teaches us something about the cultural context of creativity in children. Children have produced beautiful, distinctive work in, among other countries, Finland, Venezuela, Korea, Japan, and China. Here are our Very Young Composers in Korea. Creative capacity appears to be independent of culture and of educational structures. Let's check out a piece by another 13-year-old girl, this one from Shanghai. This is a piece by Liao Shuwen. Shuwen and Hawa were both featured on a young people's concert that was played last year, both in New York City and in Shanghai, as part of the Philharmonic's residency in Shanghai. This is one of the great opportunities we have at the New York Philharmonic to bring ideas as well as music to countries around the world. And now the Shanghai Symphony is establishing its own Very Young Composers program, as have organizations in a dozen countries. And very young composers all over the world are now exchanging what we call musical postcards, sharing their ideas through music and art and poetry. So this all leads to the question I want to leave you with, which I'll express in a few ways. Picasso said famously, and you can probably all recite this, that all children are born artists. The problem is how to remain artists once they grow up. It turns out that this is true in music as well as in visual art. So, in what ways can we nurture that creativity? In what ways can we tap children's innate creativity to motivate learning across disciplines? To celebrate their cultures? Can creativity help us make schools more joyful places? I think we're only beginning to understand the possibilities. And when I listen to music like Hawa's and Shuwen's, I feel quite convinced that we're onto something. So I leave you with those questions about creativity because it's there, and it is one of the major assets we have among the students to make them active, intrinsically motivated, joyful learners. Thank you so much for having me today.